Hey there, I'm Chris Benetti, host of the Smart Author podcast. In this episode, I speak with Taig and Anthony of Get More Listeners, and we discussed outsourcing best-selling books. Some of the main topics we will be covering today include writing several best-selling books to dominate a market in your early 20s, the system they used to get reviews for their books, and how they utilize their books for lead gen in their business. At the end of this episode, please make sure you visit our website where you can find the show notes plus all the links mentioned with Taig and Anthony. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure you subscribe so you're always the first to know when a new episode is released. And if you're struggling with book sales, head over to smartauthormedia.com/audit to get a free audit and a clear plan to get your book sales back on track. Now, let's head over to this awesome interview. Hey guys, Chris here. Welcome back to another episode of the Smart Author podcast. Today, I'm joined by Anthony and Taig of getmorelisteners.com. How are you guys going today?
Doing amazing, mate.
Yeah, pretty good. Nice morning here in the UK.
Awesome. Guys, would you mind giving everyone who's listening a bit of a background to yourself and how you became authors and, how you've transitioned into what you're doing now?
So essentially we are podcast growth coaches. And we got into this, we've been doing this for about 2.5 years. We got into it initially just from creating books, just with the aim of helping podcasters, non-fiction books, as most people that come on this show. And so like I said, we started it about 2.5 years ago. Took us a long time to write our first book. We chose podcasting essentially because it's the time, so, April 2020, that kind of time, it was just still a very exciting thing, but there was a lot of interest around it's growing really fast. Lots of people are new getting into podcasts. We had both just started listening to some ourselves. So we kind of just wanted to see what the fuss was about, and we thought it was a good chance to actually be able to learn about it, we created our first book, really just got massively involved in the community, immersed ourselves talking to a ton of podcasters, created 2 books to start with actually at once, which is a bit of an odd idea looking back on it. But there was a bit of a fork in the road, really. So one absolutely took off and is, still a bestseller today. It's called Podcaster Made Simple. The other one, not so much, called Every Podcaster's Biggest Hurdles. And it's fair to say it was a total failure. But there's a lot we learned from it, actually, which we'll maybe go into in a bit. But essentially, Podcasting Made Simple really got us, grounded and gave us some credibility in the industry, because we were even a little bit taken aback ourselves at how many people actually really managed to help and how good people found the book. So then that gave us a platform to then really build out our audience, get to know podcasters on a deeper level, create even more books, and eventually, start working with podcasters one-on-one as we are doing so now. And that's how we got to getmorelisteners.com. So at this point, so again, like I said, for the third time, it's been about 2.5 years. We have 5 books, 2 bestsellers, and we're now that's under the pen name Daniel Larson, which is another kind of funny thing, and maybe that's another story in a moment as well. But we're now the owners of getmorelisteners.com, which is kind of the direction we're moving in.
Yeah, awesome. So it's so interesting to hear that one of your books flopped. But it's an interesting study in marketing, I think, because you almost split tested 2 ideas in the same niche, right? So tell me, for both of those books, how did they conceptualize? How did they come together? And what made you go okay, let's write about hurdles and let's write about this other subject?
Yeah. So it's really interesting in terms of how it came about for Podcasting Made Simple. I think it kind of made sense because we knew we were going to eventually do a series. So, one of the branded series of books around podcasting. And of course, the starting base should really be how to start a podcast. So that's kind of how we conceptualized the idea. It was relatively straightforward for that one. But for Every Podcaster's Biggest Hurdle, that was honestly, I think we kind of looked at the market and trying to do some market research of what could be put out alongside podcasting made simple. And of course, some people might not start a podcast, they might have anxiety around it. And we looked at the market and did some market research within Facebook group communities. And a lot of things that kept on popping up was stuff like, being worried or overthinking things or having paralysis by analysis. In all honesty, looking back at it now, I've never seen people make posts about that anymore. But I think we just saw a couple posts and then just grabbed it in our mind that, podcasters had this massive hurdle about starting a podcast. And some people do. But we then decided to kind of fit all of the mental hurdles and that we believe podcasters had from the market research, which was kind of like paralysis by analysis, imposter syndrome, anxiety, procrastination, all those kinds of things into one book. But where we kind of fell short was that, as a podcaster, you might have one of those things, or you might struggle with, let's say, imposter syndrome, but you might be an action taker and don't really care about procrastination, or you might not really have anxiety around something. But we just kind of put all of these problems into one, and not one podcaster really has all of those problems, So we're trying to solve too many problems for one avatar, and that just kind of backfired on us. And the other thing as well is, which is something we've learned massively in terms of, being self-publishers, going through Amazon, you almost have to cater to the algorithm. Same way if you're a YouTuber, you have to create videos that complements the algorithm that the algorithm likes. No one's going in on Amazon typing in every podcaster's biggest hurdles. There's not really many keywords there. No one even thinks that a book exists. And we thought that that was a good thing because we saw that the market, quote unquote, wanted this, which of course we found out they didn't. And then we made a book thinking, well, we're the first book out there that's solving this problem for the market. But of course, you can see that you could take it two ways. Okay, there's no books out, which is either a gold mine or is because you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't legitimately exist. And that's kind of how that came about. And of course, that one did really well, one flopped. One was solving the real problem, the other one wasn't.
Yeah, like Anthony said, we basically just saw the phrase imposter syndrome a couple of times, got a serious case of like confirmation bias, but learned through that process, the real importance of just solving one problem at a time for one specific person, and how doing the opposite is like, a very unattractive thing to do in any form of, creation, really.
Yeah, and I guess you guys were a little bit young and naive as well, just like new to the space. Confirmation bias is.
we were like, we're gonna make it. This is amazing. This book's everyone's gonna love it. And I remember like waking up, looking at my dashboard, no sales, and I was like, oh, for God's sake. And then a month went by, and I think we made like, $70, which is literally like maybe like, I don't know, like 5 sales, if that, 5-6 sales. So that was a huge learning curve for us.
I'd love to know from your perspective, how did that failure shape the way that you guys progressed with writing books from then on? Because obviously you've had tremendous success with other books that you've released as well. Was it just like going back to that awareness of, okay, if the book solves too many problems, it's going to be ineffective. It's not going to be able to be marketed correctly. Or what were your outcomes or what takeaways from that book failure?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, obviously that just showed to us in black and white terms that, like we said before, you just can't solve more than one problem at a time. And really, most types of people only really have one major problem that they're dealing with at any time anyway. So I think it caused us to stop focusing on what are all the different problems we can find and start focusing on what's the real problem here. What's like the main thing that people are dealing with a podcast that they're just struggling with in a lot of different ways. And what we found out to be was, it's really growing the podcast. Everyone can start a podcast, and it's something that, what if they just start with a £50 mic or whatever, they'll get better at it with time, and that's all fine and that's all well. But what the majority of podcasters run into after maybe about 6 months of podcasting is that they start to flatline, and the initial boost from the algorithm and just their family and friends taking beginner's care into what they're doing kind of fades away, and then they're left with this, like I said, like a flat line, and then it even starts to decline after, which is like a very, very frustrating thing for podcasters. So really we realized that that's what we need to solve. And again, this also aligned with us then being in the industry for 6 months plus at this point. So it got to the point where we'd actually spoken to enough podcasters now. And, at this point, by the way, we've spoken to honestly, thousands of podcasters between the two of us, like literally thousands. And, we have, communities of thousands. We have live calls in our groups and stuff like that. So at this point, we know our audience really well. And we know these things, off the back of our hand. But at the time, we were still figuring them out. But what did become clear after those first two books is that, the big problem that we need to solve is how to grow a podcast. So that I think then, linking it back to our future books, we started just really focusing in on that. And then the books since have really just been a couple of different angles on how to solve that. So our next book after those initial two was called Podcast Marketing. In my opinion, that's the best book we've done. And we launched that just over a year ago now. And yeah, it's a really good asset to have. And it really helps people. And to be honest, writing that really gave us a lot of the groundwork for now doing what we're doing with one-on-one coaching, and helping podcasters grow. Because, allowed us, we spent 8 months writing the thing, and, we did an incredible amount of research. And we thought we did a lot of research for the first couple of books. But we did even so much more for, the second one. And while we're doing it, we actually got to work with podcasters, get on calls with them, all for free, just helping them out, just testing these strategies. We held our first mastermind, and, in hindsight, it was pretty terrible. There was no structure or anything at all. But it was a great place to, just give strategies to people and test them out, find out what was working. And anyway, podcast marketing was objectively a much better book than anything else. And then I guess, so then the fourth book we did was essentially just a bundle of podcast marketing and Podcaster Made Simple. And then last December, we basically tried to solve the same problem, but came out from a different angle. So we actually did like a community project. So we got 100 podcasters from our community and asked them 2 questions. So what one thing do you wish you knew before you started podcasting? And what's the one hack that you've picked up while podcasting? Probably not worded like that, but essentially something like that. And the answers we got, obviously, times 100, put together a really, really great picture with lots of, kind of covering all aspects of variance and stuff, problems you run into, partly when you're trying to start, partly like on a technical level, things like that, but a lot in terms of trying to grow and what people wish they did if they were to start again, knowing what they know now and stuff like that. So it made for a really interesting, a big bit of groundwork on, like, again, how to grow a podcast. And that's called Why 75% of Podcasts Fail and How You Can Avoid It. Because that's actually the harsh truth, So I think the stats are something crazy. Like that percentage of podcasters don't actually ever release a 5th episode because most quit before that. So gone off on a tangent there a little bit, but that's kind of how things transpired after that. And, it all came down to really that mindset shift of, we just have to solve one problem and we have to see the bigger picture rather than trying to make books about, make a chapter about like every single problem we see one comment about in a Facebook group.
Well, so I've officially made the cut. By the time this episode's out, this will be my 26th episode. So I haven't pod faded.
Nice. Yes. Come on.
No, I was talking to the boys about how I'm like months in advance with scheduling. So yeah, it's cool. It's good to hear that I've made it past the 5th episode.
Yeah, you're well and clean past it. Yeah. Big congratulations.
I'd love to know what your thoughts are around like all of those lessons, even from the 76% book, all the lessons that you've learned, being, coaches for podcasters, but also being now kind of quite experienced authors. What do you think the insights to your audience? How does that relate to being an author? Is there any like kind of Venn diagram collapsing things that relate in both industries that you think are applicable?
So yeah, absolutely 100%, and it's really interesting, because growing a podcast is very, very similar to actually growing a successful publishing business, or being an author. And what I mean by that is like, for your books, you have to do your research, you have to be well versed, you have to have your niche and your target audience that you're trying to reach. You have to create a good product that people will consume, Of course, in different mediums. For podcasters, people listen to it. For books, they read it. But it's all the same thing. They're consuming a product that you've created for them to help them hopefully solve a problem. And so in terms of the marketing side of being an author and thinking about how to market a book and create a good product, it relates basically like parallel, the exact same as like, you know, how a podcaster really should think about how to grow and market their own product. And then in terms of the other aspects, the practical side of actually growing an audience as an author is the exact same principles as we would give our students when they're trying to grow their podcasting audience as well. You know, not everyone's going to love your book, and not everyone needs to love your book or to read your book. Not everyone wants to become a podcaster. So I try to market to your already existing audience who, for the most part, is going to be a fixed percentage of them who might be interested in podcasting or might not. And that same principle applies to podcasters. Like, you know, you can try to force people to listen to your podcast about veganism, but if only 10% of them are vegan and the other, you know, 90% are like, meat lovers, it doesn't matter how many times you try to, market to those people, your audience is going to stay kind of fixed. So for us, it's finding new sets of audience to help market our book to who actually want to listen to our books, like going into Facebook groups, giving out freebies. For podcasters, it will be them finding their own online communities and engaging, providing value there, and then hopefully trying to convert some of their audience into your own. And then also with SEO, you know, like I mentioned at the start, like for us, we didn't cater to the algorithm of Amazon, because you have to rank for specific keywords. And, you know, every podcast's biggest hurdles, you know, again, no one's really typing that in. Whereas podcast marketing, people are, podcasting in general, people are. And that kind of parallels again with podcasters, with your, you know, your titles and creating an attractive title and attractive cover. Same with a book, you have to have an attractive title and attractive cover with the right keywords so you can rank high on search. And these are kind of aspects that we honestly, you know, SEO has become such a big part of what we go through with our students, because the results have just been, we've taken a podcast from literally dead, no numbers, like basically 100 downloads per episode, per month sort of thing. So quite literally within 90 days, getting like 2,000, 3,000 downloads per month just from fixing their SEO, same content, exact same thing. So that's kind of the learning parallels between the two. Honestly, I think they're basically the same as how to grow and market them. They're exact same. So that's helped us massively, not just with our publishing business, but also when we kind of translate and try to communicate the skills that we've learned from publishing to podcasters and just helping them apply it. And, you know, if this isn't just theory, we've applied it and it works exceptionally well. So yeah.
Yeah, and I think to add to that, the big parallel, if you're just trying to sum it up, is like when you start a podcast for a while and going back to that time when you flatline, is like kind of the same realization you have if you put out a book without doing this kind of groundwork first. You realize that, like, you know, a good product doesn't sell itself, which if you're not already a marketer, you don't necessarily know, because, you know, back, you know, 10 or 20 years ago, that might have been a little different without the internet and stuff like that. And that's the realization that podcasters, who again for the most part are not marketers, come to, and people who try and do non-fiction books before they have marketing experience, like we first did, also come to. So, you know, there's a lot that comes into, like Anthony said, honestly, the SEO is massive. And then it also just comes down to, you know, you have to make sure you're showing people the benefits of what they're going to get out of consuming your product, to give them a reason to choose yours over all the other stuff out there. Again, podcast, you know, there's obviously a bunch on one page when you're searching for them, same as books on Amazon or whatever. You know, even with your cover, you really can't just skim over that and make sure that's homemade. It's got to be, you know, it's got to imply that there's a really high quality product inside, which exactly goes to books as well, you know. So there's really, as Anthony says, there's actually so many parallels.
And, you know, after I asked the question, I'm just thinking about it more and more. Like, so just to reiterate what you guys have just said, like, you can't rely, like, there's an aspect of relying on keywords for searchability and discoverability, but you can't rely on that. You know, if you don't proactively do things to get in front of people, then, you know, your book is determined to not sell. Your podcast is determined to not be listened to, essentially. So, and the more I think about it again, coming back to the purpose, like, a lot of people will write a book. They want to create authority for themselves. They want to give value in the marketplace, just like they would for a podcast. But the other aspect is that they're lead generation tools as well. A book will lead to you and your world. A podcast, again, there's a further, customer journey that someone can go on beyond the podcast most of the time, whether it be an email list, whether it be other programs that they offer. And, both basically overlap in the same respect. It's just that a book is like a one-time thing that you create and revise potentially, whereas a podcast is something that you continuously do, again, potentially. And I mean, the more that I'm thinking about it, it's like a book is almost like a podcast. Like each chapter is almost like a podcast episode, or like, it's kind of like that. You're telling a journey, you're taking someone through an experience across your show from, episode 1 to episode whatever. So I'm seeing more, I'm like discovering all of the similarities just as I'm thinking about it more and more.
Yeah, for sure. It's like you say, it really is exactly that. But most people don't necessarily think of that, at first. It takes a kind of a while to really see those parallels and realize that.
Yeah. So I would love to know some more insights as you guys are best-selling authors. Like, do you have any systems for organically like boosting your book sales, or any ways to like get more reviews on your books or get more leads from your books, anything like that?
Yeah, 100%. And I think really I want to say it boils down to fundamentally 5 things, which sounds like a lot, but it's relatively straightforward. Number 1 would just be make sure you have, the right keywords in your title and subtitle of your book. It's as simple as that straight away. If you're a self-published author, you haven't got the privilege or the, the advantage of people just knowing you by your name or want to buy your book just because you are who you are. You're not Tony Robbins, so you don't expect to just make a book called Sunrise and then become a bestseller when the book's about, I don't know, like turbines or something like that. Like it needs to be related and have like some correlation. So have the right keywords that people are searching in on these platforms. So if that's Amazon, make sure to do your keyword research and get the right keywords in your title. Number 2, craft a very compelling title that people will want to purchase the book, and kind of in the subtitle show them that you understand them, and then show them that you have the solution for them. So an example of this could be something like if you have if your book is about generating leads or something like that, how to generate qualified leads consistently in the next 30 days, even if you're a complete beginner, or using our 5-step lead gen process or system, something like that, where they kind of know, okay, this guy understands me, all I want is qualified lead consistently. And then 2, he also has a solution, which is the 5 steps to getting to their desired outcome. So I think that's really powerful, kind of communicating that you really do understand your customer. The other thing would kind of be the cover, which Taig mentioned. At the end of the day, when you go on Amazon as a catalog, you're competing, whether you like it or not. And same as a podcast, you're competing. And if someone doesn't know who you are off-right, they're going to be looking at your cover. And if it doesn't catch them out over your competitors, you're done, and we've optimized some of our books by changing the covers, and the sales dramatically increased, like literally like 3x. Like a book would be dead, then we change the cover, just the cover, and there's a 3-time increase in our revenue. So I'll say split test covers, you might be making good money now. You can always revert back if you need to. Obviously you might not want to build momentum, but it could get better as well. So don't get too comfortable. The 4th thing would be just make a legitimately good book and good product, because at the start you might have the best market in the world, but same with other things, that will, if you get loads of sales, it's only going to increase the rate in which your book dies, because you're going to get like just horrible reviews. So really make sure it's a good product. And then finally, in terms of strategically getting reviews, I'll just say at the start of the launch, focus on giving away free copies of your book in return for honest feedback and review on Amazon. Don't chase after book sales and try to go grab my book. No. Like, you can leverage your audience and your existing audience, your podcasting audience, whatever audience you have, by just giving away free copies, adding them to a list, and then having like a follow-up sequence to get them to review it once it's launched. People love that because they feel like they're getting, they're part of your early readers team, and they feel like it's an exclusive club. That's also a way for you to kind of help you with the algorithm in the long term, because now you have a lot of good reviews, lots of good feedback on the offset. And whether we like it or not, people shopping on Amazon look at reviews, not necessarily reading reviews, But if you have 10 reviews versus 100 reviews, people psychologically, the social proof is just there. Like, oh, okay, this is a good book. They won't even read. You know, if it's like 4.5 stars, they're not even going to maybe read through the reviews. They just want to know enough people have acknowledged this book and said it's a good book and gave you the green light. So that's been, you know, I think, focus on those 5 things, and you'll be fine in terms of ranking on Amazon. And then I guess the final thing would actually just be do market research before to make sure there's actually a need for the book. Don't do what me and Taig done and just create a book out of thin air thinking this is a brilliant idea. Unfortunately, the market, and this is what we said, say to people all the time. Are we allowed to swear on this podcast?
Swear, yeah, go ahead.
No. The market doesn't care about your idea, no matter how good it is. The market wants what the market wants. It's as simple as that. Don't try to force, you know, vegetables down a crying baby's throat, because the baby will just spit it out in your face. And that's kind of the same analogy with the market with the books. You don't try to just force a book down a market's throat, because you're going to get burnt. You're going to waste a lot of money and a lot of time. So do your research before and give the market what it wants.
That's some serious gold. Yeah, just to reiterate one of the points, I think a big mindset, well, not necessarily shift, because I think by the way, we're taught how to do it. We kind of had it from the start, but a lot of people might not initially think is, when the launch of the book, actually you need to chase reviews rather than chasing sales. Everyone's just trying to make money from their book straight away, or their initial thoughts again is like trying to get people to buy their book. But that's actually something that, again, I'm not saying it can never work, but we don't, that's not how we do it. We just chase reviews first. It's way more important to get reviews before you even start thinking about sales. And like Anthony said, that comes from up to the launch of your book. Before it's actually out, you want to just give away as many free copies of your book as you can, and ask for an honest feedback. When you do give the book, it's actually an important distinguishment as well, that you can't. It technically doesn't go with Amazon's policies if you're doing it in exchange for an honest for feedback or review. So you kind of have to just give them away and just do it as a goodwill gesture, and then hope that people will review. And you can obviously ask people and stuff, but you can't give it away on the premise that they leave a review, which is a very subtle thing. But like we learned that as well. But yeah, that having that mindset, I think, really helps, and is probably the reason why. It's the difference between getting off to hit the ground running with like building reviews, and just being a month deep and just only having like 5 reviews, and then it's really hard to like pick your sales off the ground. There's something else I was going to say, but essentially, yeah, that's really helped us out a lot.
So if I am the person who has is in the boat of being has published my book it's been out for 2 years and I've only got 5 reviews, would you recommend doing a like review re-engagement campaign where I've maybe sold my books on a different channel, different marketplace, maybe I've just done fulfillment myself? Would you recommend that like I email my book buyers and ask them to potentially go back to Amazon and leave reviews so I can get those numbers up a little bit before trying to actively promote my book on Amazon?
Yeah, I would. I think so. Going back to what Anthony said, it's less about like it's less about even the quality of reviews, as long as it's just really, are they positive or negative. Obviously the first few that show on the front page matter, but like, yeah, you in any niche, you need to have a lot more than that kind of number to do some damage in terms of sales. And from what we found, again, this isn't like gospel from Amazon, this is just from our experience. You can always pick so if a book dies, if it doesn't sell for like a few months or whatever, you can pick it back up and still get it ranking on page 1 from sales. Obviously, you just need to hammer ads, and it's always possible. But of course, you can't actually make sales and convert your ads if there's not reviews there in the first place. So what I think, kind of saying that, you can always like resuscitate a book if you like algorithmically. But obviously, it does take the reviews there first. So it's I don't think it's ever too late, I guess is my point. But yeah, like we always shoot for 100 reviews to start with. And we don't really stop focusing on giving away free copies. We don't really move the paradigm from reviews to sales until we're at 100 reviews. And sometimes that's a little bit overkill. In some niches, even 30 to 50 reviews can be enough to kind of solidify that social proof. But we always like to just overshoot, because if you get to triple figures, then you're just set. And that I would I would say that goes in any niche. If you have 100 reviews on a book in any niche, and it's obviously a genuinely good book, then you're kind of set with a social proof. That's enough to really compete with, with whatever other competition is out there.
Yeah. Okay.
And so I was just going to say, just to add to that as well, because you mentioned something about your email list. I think there's really three ways you could try to generate reviews. Giving away loads of book on the front end, in terms of giving away loads of free copies of your book. Then having a lead magnet to capture people's emails within the book. If you haven't got like a massive back end, if your primary source of income is the book, you can generate more reviews by basically giving away a lead magnet and then following up with people within your list to say, hey, you've obviously purchased the book, so they've got it, they've gone through it. So follow up with them to leave a review. And then at the end of each chapter as well, if you wanted to, you can kind of say, if you got X, Y, and Z value from this, then be sure to quickly head on Amazon and just be transparent. Like, it looks worse if you beg without being transparent and honest about why you're asking. You say, hey, look, it helps us out with the algorithm and make sure that this reaches the most amount of people. People can appreciate that. So don't shy away from it, just be transparent. I think those are kind of, not more tactics that you could do to really help you bump up the reviews. And of course, like I don't think we mentioned, but it gets to a point where when the algorithm takes over, because you're making so much sales, you didn't have to chase up for reviews. Like we don't chase up anyone for reviews for our books anymore. They just, each month they just grow and grow and grow, because we're at a scale now where there's just so many people who've had our books who now just organically leave reviews. But you have to get to that point to be able to then be like, okay, I'm chilling now. And I'll probably say after 100 reviews, you're pretty Gucci in terms of leaving off, like Taig said.
Awesome. And one last question. Have you found price to be another split test point? Obviously, Amazon will determine what price your book will be listed at in the corresponding marketplace, their own, depending on the sales and things like that. But have you guys tested price from low to high, or have you found that to be dramatically an impactor in any way?
I think it depends what niche you're in, what market you're in, and also depends kind of how you position the book. So, for example, if you've got a workbook, obviously you can charge more for that, even though it might be less work to produce. But if you're on like a children's niche and you're doing like children's book, there's a high likelihood that people aren't going to be paying $17.99 for your book. But for us, in terms of how we split tested, well, we kind of just do from launch, because we're just trying to. So it's important. There's a point of distinction. On Amazon, we're still trying to get lots of sales, but we're not actively marketing the book to get sales. We're just like ranking the book and then running ads to the book to get sales. So then what we'll do is we'll have it start at $11.99 for the first week, just to get the Amazon ads running on that side of things. And then after the second week, we then bump up by $1. Then the third week, another $1. Then the fourth week, another $1, until we kind of hit a point where, there's kind of diminishing returns. We can kind of see, okay, things start to slow down a little bit. Let's move it back one level and then keep at this price, if that makes sense. So if it was like, if we got to $17.99 and saw dramatic decrease in sales or conversion in our ads, then we know, well, something's obviously going off here, so let's reduce that and keep at $16.99. Seems like such a dollar, you think a dollar will make a difference, but it actually does sometimes. And also depends if it's in summer or in winter, because in summer most of the time people aren't actively buying books as much, whereas Q4 you can have your book priced ridiculous, like just insane numbers, and it just goes mental. People still buy just because they're in kind of a buying frenzy coming up to Christmas. So that's a quick tactic for anyone.
What would you say our increase in price for like summer to Q4 is on average? Do you think it's like a 25-30% increase or something?
What?
So it's in like in the price of like most of our books.
Oh, okay, in the price.
What's because you normally do.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think it goes from like $14.99 to like $17.99. So I can't really work out. You can you're the mathematician, Taig, so you can try to work out the percentage increase. But I think maybe was that 25? I'm not too sure.
No, I'm not going to butcher it live on the but, you get the point.
And just so we're talking pounds or like
Euros? Dollars, USD.
Yeah, dollars, yeah. Okay, cool. Yeah. Awesome. Well, ton of awesome tactics here, guys. Thank you for your time today. Is there anything else you would like to mention before we wrap up?
Yeah, I mean, if you're a podcaster that's out there who's looking to go from a slow and steady growth, and you've been at this for a few months, if not years now, and you're really struggling to figure out the best for the growing market, your show, and you want to go from slow and steady to rapidly growing and thriving, and honestly just explore a new path of people who've done it before and help other podcasters do it, then go to, getmorelisteners.com and kind of, have a little browse and see what we do. And I'd like to kind of invite you into our world. Yeah.
Awesome. And make sure you mention that you came from the Smart Author podcast if you do that. But yeah, these guys are fantastic and they will absolutely look after you. So thank you so much again, guys. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I can't wait for everyone to get all of the absolute gold that you guys dropped.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, Chris. It's been great.
Thanks, Chris. Been a pleasure.
Damn, what an awesome episode. If you enjoyed it, please consider subscribing on your podcast platform of choice so you get notified every single time a new episode releases. And if you're struggling with your book sales, head over to smartauthormedia.com/audit to get a free audit of your book sales to see where we can help you bridge the gap between not many sales to a lot of sales. It's a free resource call that we have together where I give you some clear action steps that you can take to take your stuff from broken to selling. I'll see you over there. Thanks again for listening.